If you haven't seen the first part of this series yet, I would highly recommend you do so now. After you finish this video, you may also want to check out the third part, which covers the Datamined Tour original courses. This video only covers upcoming retros. Thanks for tuning in. Also, while I'm at it, a quick disclaimer. I am not a dataminer for Mario Kart Tour or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I am simply a fan who spends an absurd amount of time on the internet researching and theory crafting, and I want to help other people do the same by gathering into one place and amplifying the voices of actual dataminers. I do my absolute utmost to fact check and verify everything here that I present as factual, but if you have any concerns or doubts, I would advise you to shoot me a comment or DM on Discord, or alternatively you could go straight to one of the experts I have cited in the description below. Now, with all that out of the way, all of the following information is up to date as of June 2023's wedding tour. My current plan is to make a Datamine update video every time a new tour begins, a major Datamining breakthrough is made, or a big buzz is making the rounds in the community and I want to cover it. Please consider subscribing if you don't want to miss all that. Since Super Mario Kart courses seem to be all the rage these days, I figured we'd start there. As of right now, the only Super Nintendo course explicitly datamined for Mario Kart Tour is Ghost Valley 3, via an environment JSON file that only appears in the files for tours that have Remix Ghost Valley 1, even though Remix GV1 has its own environment file. The file name explicitly refers to SFC_Ghost Valley 3, but whether the course is ever actually intended to appear is unclear, since it doesn't have an ID gap and nothing else has been heard of the course so far. Maybe its inclusion was scrapped in favor of Remix GV1, we may never know. While we're talking about Super Nintendo courses, I would like to make it clear that unfortunately, neither of the other Super Nintendo Bowser Castles, 1 or 2, have any evidence for their inclusion currently. Bowser Castle 3 closed the Super Nintendo BC gap, so as far as we can tell, it seems like Nintendo really just decided to bring back 3 specifically so it could be in the Booster Course Pass, and then dipped again. Maybe next game. One more thing I'd like to show you before moving on is this screenshot of Super Nintendo Koopa Troopa Beach 2 RT. This is a rare instance of Nintendo themselves confirming a missing course's existence, as you can see these arrow fences that are pointing in the R direction, but don't exist anywhere on the actual R variant. I once joked that they meant to include 2RT, but just forgot, and now it's been so long that if you asked them they'd be like, wait, we never debuted it? But it looks like that joke will be outdated pretty soon, because the forecasts indicate that we could see it finally surfacing within the next month or two. Hopefully that'll tide you Super Nintendo fans over until the next game. Moving on to Mario Kart 64 courses, the most significant thing we have to go off here is an ID gap between Luigi Raceway, known internally as Luigi Circuit, and Royal Raceway, known internally as Peach Circuit. If we look at the courses from 64, we can see 2 candidates for this spot, Mario Raceway and Moo Moo Farm. The gap size is currently 18. Gap size and growth investigation is far from an exact science, but signs seem to point to it only containing 1 course. Mario Raceway has been confirmed to be coming to the Mario vs. Luigi Tour this Wednesday, so depending on what it does to the ID gap, we'll find out for certain whether Moo Moo Farm still has a shot, but for now it's not looking good. We've actually known that Mario Raceway was worked on for some time now, due to the fact that, strangely, the file name for DS Mario Circuit Skybox isn't DSMC_Skybox, but instead N64MR_Skybox. Why it would be referred to internally as MR instead of MC, like N64LC and N64PC would have us expect, we may never know. Since we're on the topic of Nintendo 64 courses, I think now's a good time to mention the one and only time that a render ID gap never yielded a course. All the way back in 2020, a gap between GameCube Yoshi Circuit and Nintendo 64 Frappe Snowland gave rise to Choco Mountain in the Exploration Tour that July. With its addition, a tiny gap of 2 remained above it, in which only Banshee Boardwalk or Bowser's Castle could fit. The gap actually grew by 1 a couple times afterwards, but then mysteriously vanished in that October's first anniversary tour. No other evidence that either course was ever worked on has appeared since, unless you count the long unused code for sideways moving thwomps. So it's entirely up in the air whether this was a mistake or an actual instance of a scrapped course. One common theory is that Banshee was intended to debut alongside Super Nintendo Ghost Valley 2 in that year's Halloween tour, but something threw a wrench in their plans and both were delayed indefinitely, with GV2, which actually appeared in the Halloween tour announcement banner, not showing up until September 2022's Mario vs. Luigi tour. As for Mario Kart Super Circuit courses, there's much more to talk about than the last two categories, so I won't waste any time. Right now, there are 2 render ID gaps for Game Boy Advance courses, but the first one is a bit of a nothing burger, with a gap size of 2 and obviously being for Bowser's Castles 4RT and 4T. The size indicates that no _main renders have been made yet, so don't get too excited for it to show up anytime soon. The other gap is a relatively big one, with a current size of 43, indicating 2 courses. No matter how you slice it, 1 or 3 courses would be a huge stretch at this point. Alphabetically, the gap could contain any course between Cheep Cheep Island and Peach Circuit, including Cheeseland, Lakeside Park, Luigi Circuit, and Mario Circuit. Luigi Circuit has also been confirmed for the Mario vs. Luigi Tour, so once again we'll find out pretty soon what the gap looks like without it. We've actually had explicit confirmation for Luigi Circuit since September 2021, in the form of references to objects entitled Airship LC and Puddle LC, which are obviously staple features of the course. As for the other course in the gap, we also have a reference to a Rock Volcano object, which at one point was thought to be for Wii Grumble Volcano, but when Grumble's ID gap closed due to Dry Dry Ruins' addition, and when people realized that Grumble shoots lava, not rocks, the community's attention moved to Lakeside Park, which is the only other retro course to feature a volcano that would require unique obstacles. Don't count your chickens before they hatch though, because we've had several instances of Datamined assets that the community thought was pointing to one retro, but ended up being used for a brand new course or a huge revamp of an old one, like Singapore Speedway's Datamined conveyor belts that people thought were for Wii Toad's Factory, or Super Nintendo Bowser Castle 3's Datamined Bone Piranha Plants that people thought might have been for Wii U Bone Dry Dunes. Another thing potentially going in Lakeside's favor is this gap apparently being connected to some kind of tropical or jungle tour slated to come either right after or not long after the Mario vs. Luigi tour, featuring courses like 3DS Cheep Cheep Lagoon and GameCube Dino Dino Jungle, so that might be a good time to debut it. Now, as far as I'm aware, Mario Circuit currently has nothing that could point to it being planned, and while there are unused references to the forks that chain chomps are attached to in Mario Kart 8's Cheeseland, there aren't any references to the breakable piles of cheese also seen in that course. So while it's not for certain just yet, the current community consensus is that Lakeside Park is the last Game Boy Advance course we're seeing here, which should be released by early summer. Personally, I'll be pretty bummed if it gets in, since that would indicate that the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe developers chose Riverside over it for inclusion in the Booster Course Pass, but it's far from the only awesome Game Boy Advance remake that got passed over due to space, so what can you do? In case you didn't know, Sunset Wilds has been datamined to be the last remaining Game Boy Advance course in the pass. Sorry, BC4 fans. Next up is Mario Kart Double Dash, and this is an interesting one for sure. Right now we have one GameCube render ID gap of size 26, alphabetically between Mushroom Bridge and Yoshi Circuit, and courses that could fit here include Mushroom City, Peach Beach, Sherbet Land, Rainbow Road, Waluigi Stadium, and Wario Colosseum. And, once again, Waluigi Stadium has been confirmed for the next tour, although its inclusion should hardly be news to us since it's already in the Booster Course Pass and every course in the BCP is remastered from Tour, and additionally references to Wal Pakun and Wal Dokkan objects, Pakun meaning Piranha Plant and Dokkan meaning Pipe, had suggested the course's existence since April 2021. This gap is the subject of a lot of debate in the community right now because it's actually impossible to say for certain whether it contains a second course alongside Waluigi Stadium. An ID size of 26 would be slightly above average for a single unreleased course, and the gap did receive a suspiciously large ID increase of 10 in late 2022, which might indicate the addition of another course to the gap. But at the same time, it would not be unprecedented by any means if it did turn out to just be Stadium. So until we see what becomes of the gap when the Mario vs. Luigi tour begins, it's entirely up in the air. It has been pointed out that every course in the last two tours has debuted at a size of 24 or more, and that there have been no ID increases since the Bowser tour, But I want to point out that we know that one of the 2 remaining Game Boy Advance courses in the gap of 43 have an ID size of 21 or less, so again, it's not entirely off the table just yet. We'll find out for sure on Wednesday. Hang in there. As for the other GameCube course that could be in this gap, we can largely dismiss Peach Beach, Sherbet Land, and Rainbow Road, since the majority of course assets are added to the game even before their respective courses are added to the IDs, and all 3 of these courses are missing key object references that would otherwise be used for them. As such, the top contenders are Mushroom City and Wario Coliseum, which both have all of the assets they would need. Now you can't call it pure copium if someone predicts one of these courses for the Booster Course Pass. Maybe some copium, but not pure copium. Moving on to Mario Kart DS courses and, this one's actually a pretty big nothing burger right now. No gaps, no assets, no nothing. Sorry DS fans, maybe you'll get Delfino Square in the next game. Moving on again. Unfortunately, Mario Kart Wii fans don't have much to chew on either. Right now there is one render ID gap for Wii courses, between Maple Treeway and Mushroom Gorge. Dubbed by fans as the M gap, there are 3 courses that could go here: Mario Circuit, Moo Moo Meadows, and Moonview Highway. At a size of 26, this gap is a similar story to the GameCube gap, with its size and growth patterns possibly indicating that it contains more than one course, but it's impossible to say for certain. As for what courses to expect, Moo Moo Meadows is highly unlikely at this time due to a lack of references to Moo Moos, while both Mario Circuit and Moonview Highway have all the assets they'd need. Beyond that, it's anyone's guess. I'm currently leaning towards Moonview since there's been a bit of an overflow of circuit courses this year, but you really can never know with these tour devs. I don't think anyone was expecting them to debut 3 retros in the Mario vs. Luigi tour, even when the IDs indicated it. Mario Kart 7 courses are a bit of a quandary right now in the data mining scene. Tour already has 28 of the 32 courses from that game, 12 of its 16 nitros and all 16 of its retros, so you might think that they're going to go all the way with 3DS content. Well, that was actually probably the plan at some point. We have explicit references to assets from all 4 of the remaining 3DS courses: Mako Woohoo, Woohoo Loop, Music Park, and DK Jungle that have been in the game practically since launch, although the latter 2 are still missing some important ones. However, there are currently no ID gaps for any of these courses, so, like so many other aspects of tour speculation, it's impossible to say when these courses might come, if ever. If I left out this part, I'd no doubt have people in the comments bugging me about courses for Mario Kart 8, so for the penultimate section of Datamined course discussion, I'm going to argue against the notion that any Wii U courses might be coming to Tour. I'm sure you've heard by now that a toggle for anti-gravity was datamined for the game quite some time ago, but I'm here to tell you now that it's already used. It doesn't have any aesthetic or mechanical changes, but it's used on 3DS Wario Shipyard and Nintendo 64 Yoshi Valley to keep the camera in a good spot behind the racer when they go up awkwardly banked turns. It might be used for other courses too, but currently Dataminers have only verified its usage on those 2. You might have also heard of the references to Mecha Cheep Cheeps, Puku Puku Mecha, objects only previously seen in Wii U Water Park. But I'm willing to bet that this is one of those assets that's just being brought back for usage in a different course, especially when the other asset that was once attributed to a Wii U course, the Bone Piranha Plants from Bone Dry Dunes, suffer this exact fate. Actually, I think these Mecha Cheep Cheeps would work quite well for the Datamined Tour original course set in a bathroom, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Another argument that Wii U course proponents have made is that we might not know whether Wii U courses have IDs assigned, since they could come after Wii courses alphabetically, which is currently at the end of the list. This is a fine point, but I personally think it would be much more likely for them to just have a U prefix internally, hence coming between Super Nintendo and Wii, because that's what they do in Mario Kart 8. And I'm not a fan of the "you can't prove it's not" argument anyhow. Finally, I'd like to point out that Tour is 3.5 years old now. If they're gonna add Wii U courses, what's taking them so dang long? It seems to me like they just don't want to add retro courses to a free game that are taken from a game they're still trying to sell. At this point, it just wouldn't make any sense to me. So, in conclusion, don't hold your breath for courses for Mario Kart 8.